enough of the boring stuff. Let's just get right to Adam. He's got a great presentation. He's going to do a lot of introduction, I believe. So I won't say much, but we're so pleased to have Adam here from Roanoke, Virginia. He's building commercial passive houses for people who don't want them, don't care about the environment. So Adam, take it away.
Thanks. And I am really happy to be here. When I took my passive house training, I had discovered passive house a while before, and I've been bugging Katrine Klingenberg about when is she going to have class, for about every month for 8 months, until she finally had a class, and it was up here in Boston. And so a lot of the folks, I feel like I've come home because a lot of the folks I went through training with are here in this room, and it's pretty exciting to see everybody, and we've all kind of grown together because I can tell you that when we took training, I think it was maybe the second training they did, or maybe the third, I don't know which one it was really early, they really hadn't figured out how to train us. So we spent a lot of time in between sessions figuring out what the heck was really going on, and trying to figure out what was going on behind the scenes and why this was really working. And if it wasn't for some of the really brilliant people in this room, I would not have gotten through it. So for me, this has been kind of like coming home, so, and it's been really great. So what I'm gonna go, I got inspired at the National Passive House Conference by Joe Stieber, okay? Because when he was describing in the early 80s doing ground tubes, to bring air into the into a house, and then talking about coming back a year later and filling those in with concrete, I was there. I mean, that's the same exact thing we did, and I was like, oh my God, this is, and so I always felt like I was kind of alone out in the wilderness where I was in Virginia, and I kind of thought, well, you know what, I'd have a little bit of before I got into my main talk, I'd kind of go down memory lane and show you kind of how I came here, because unlike you guys who actually have a community of people who are like-minded, however small that may be, in Roanoke, Virginia, which is Southwest Virginia, Bible Belt South, what I believe in is not very highly prized by my neighbors. In fact, my Obama yard signs were stolen the night before I came up here. So it kind of gives you an idea of what I'm dealing with. So, for those of us who are in this room, my guess is most of us believe that we're not going to be living in the same world 30 years from now, right? I believe that 30 years ago. I am just even way more convinced of it now. But you wouldn't be sitting in this room if you didn't have a feeling that you could maybe do something about it, right? We're not throwing up our hands and saying that it's impossible to fix. So for me, who am I? I'm the guy who, when I was in high school, was reading Ken Kern. So if you guys know who Ken Kern is, then I can say you're probably in that same group of people who are kind of those back to land, Mother Earth News type people doing this. I was also very inspired by Gaudi and Malcolm Wells, who's here on the Cape. He was a hero of mine in architecture school. They kept giving me all kinds of crap about designing underground stuff. And I was like, but look, there's a whole book about it. Because I thought it was super cool. Fry Otto, Saarinen, and Michael Reynolds. These are the people that inspired me. And if you'll notice something about kind of a lot of this work, it's all very kind of artistic and sculptural, and that's because when I grow up, I want to be a sculptor. So someday, I will actually make a living doing this, but it probably won't be till after I'm dead, unfortunately. So when I was getting ready to, go to college, we had a deal. It was I was going to pay a third, my dad was going to pay a third, and my mom was going to pay a third. They're divorced. And so my dad, who is practical, he's a physicist and a builder, he said, well, if you go to art school, I'm not giving you my third. All right, so I looked and I said, well, the architecture building at University of Maryland is right across, that's where I grew up in Maryland, it's right across the street from the art building. And I've been on carpentry crews since I was 12. I was the free labor that got, and that my dad just said, here, take them and teach them. And so I knew about cussing about architectural plans, and I thought architecture is like big sculpture you live in. So I went to the University of Maryland, got a degree in architecture. And immediately when I got out, I said, well, that's the last thing I want to do. So we got out and I started building what I call healthy homes, right? off-grid houses that had no chemicals or glues or any kind of thing in it that could be construed to be not healthy in my young mind. And after 10 years of doing this, I had a family of 5. I was making on a good year $20,000 on a good year. The only people that really were interested in what I did were poor hippies who really couldn't afford to pay me. So one day, I'll never forget this, we were taking the kids, we had my truck and the 3 kids in the back, and we were, and you know, like you went to the grocery store, you knew exactly how much you had to spend, you know, it was like, that's how you just live. And I remember putting like our grocery bag, and then it fell over, and some oranges and apples rolled out, and then rolled out and fell out of the floorboard on the bottom of my pickup because it was all rotted out because we could only afford the $800 pickup. And I said, man, I got to do something else, right? I mean, I just got it. So I got away from what I believed in, started working for other people, and eventually started my own company, and we started doing more kind of traditional building, right? I was still into energy efficiency, but I wasn't pushing it because I couldn't sell it, right? So we did commercial, we do residential. We built the firm up to 42 people. We were doing very successfully. We have been, knock on wood. And we were sitting at the table with my son, who is now in college, but he was about 12 at the time. And he was telling me about, you know, they were learning about climate change in school. He says, well, Dad, how long have people known about this and done, you know? I was like, well, you know, Zev, back in 70s and 80s, we weren't really calling it climate change. We were worried about the environment. We were worried about, you know, our effect on the environment. And just like as innocent as a kid could be, he looked at me and he goes, you mean 40 years and nobody's done anything? Just like, it was like somebody slapped me in the face, and I just felt like, okay, I sold out. It was like, you know, I felt like he had personally called me out, even though it was just an innocent comment. And so I said, well, I got to do something that instead of just making money, right? So I started looking around. I wanted to do, I was already working on a low energy project, but it was very slow burn, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but it was on a very slow burner. But I thought, well, maybe I'll try to do some affordable housing or something. And so I said, well, let me look into research and see kind of some documentation. What are people doing right now? So I found this Kronsberg house talked about, or the study in Hanover, and I said, somebody has obviously converted something wrong, because there's no way these buildings are using this little energy. You know, there was no way that meant, so somebody had multiplied something wrong or divided. And so I got the study, downloaded the study from the internet, and I was just like hooked. I was like, oh my God, they figured it out, right? Because I was one of those guys who in the early 80s built some super insulated stuff and came back a couple of years later to fix the problem because the buildings were melting, right? And then said, well, obviously I can't do that very well, so I'm not going to do that again. And when I read the studies, I was like, wow, that's amazing that they really figured out how to do super insulation. They got the building physics behind it. People like Mark had been dealing with it for 30 years. I was one of these cowboy guys that said, oh, I read about it in Mother Earth News. I can go build that, build it, and melt it. Okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else. Okay, so I discovered the passive house stuff, and this is the project that was on a slow burn. This was 7 years in the making, and there's a local county. They have 2 very visionary teachers who had the idea to create a freestanding building for advanced environmental studies students that would throw every bell and whistle that you could throw in it about sustainability, and then use the building and the data from the building to underpin all the basic education requirements in the county. So the idea was, if you learn about recycling in kindergarten, they would take you here and they could show you recycled materials that were used. If you're learning about, you know, percentages in 6th grade, you know, instead of Jimmy's got 10 apples and Jamie's got 17 apples and like that, they say, well, on the seed center, this is called the Center for Energy Efficient Design, we have a 1 kilowatt fixed array, we have a 1 kilowatt tracking array, it's this many square meters, you can go online and download the data, what percentage is this one better than that one, you know? So the idea is you're learning your basic skills, but you're also learning about sustainability. And, you know, it's got a ton of stuff. It's a LEED Platinum building, so it's got, you know, we don't have bike racks. I must say I fought hard against bike racks. And we don't have bike racks in the building. I mean, there was no place to go. This is rural Virginia, right? I mean, nobody rides a bike. I mean, come on. So But they wanted that point, and I fought hard against that point. I said, that's stereotypically the worst thing you could do. So this building, though, was before, like, it was 7 years in the making, right? So originally, I had no idea about passive house. This was originally designed as an earth sheltered building, because I knew I could count on an earth sheltered building to save me 40% energy, and I knew that 40% energy was about as good as I was going to get up to do affordably. So we had actually designed it. We had gotten $400,000 worth of grants towards the building. My firm put in $160,000 back when we actually had money to do things like this. And then me and my partner raised another $100,000 in the community. And then we went to the school board and said, we can give you a state-of-the-art $1 million building, and it's going to cost you $400,000 bucks. How could they say no, right? I mean, that was the proposition basically. And of course they bid off. But then it was like maybe 4 months later, I went for my first class for passive house training. I was like, wait a second, I can save more energy, right? I could go to 70%. So when I got back, I said to the superintendent, you know, I think we can probably save some more energy by going to passive house. And he had no idea what passive house was. And he said, well, you've already got the commitment for the board. If you can do it and you save more energy, you just can't cost any more money. Okay, so it was a challenge. So we redesigned the building. It took about 3.5 months to redesign, calculate price. This building was $26,000 less than the earth sheltered building. It was 25% more efficient. Woo! So I came to him and I said, yeah, we saved 25% energy. He goes, how much does it cost? $26,000 less. He was very happy. So now this is the Hillel project at Virginia Tech. This is an 8,000 square foot multi-use assembly building with offices and conference room and multi-purpose and sanctuary, and as now I know, the first commercial kitchen within the passive house envelope that has an exhaust hood, that's a commercial exhaust hood. We now have measures, and then believe me, anybody wants to go into some really technical, gritty details about this, it's really interesting, but suffice it to say, the passive house metric at 0.6 ACH 50, with our dampers closed on our hood, we're at 0.53 ACH 50 with this building. With our damper open, we're at 2.8. So it can be done. It's not fun. This is a dental clinic. This is we're currently under construction on this. We'll be finished in about 2 months. And this dental clinic is really neat because we're working with the Passive House Institute in Darmstadt on this for buildings with high process loads. They do what's called a prototype certification. So if they have not done this type of a building, they've done laboratories, they've done grocery stores. Well, there's no way a building with a high process load will meet the energy metric of the 120 kilowatt hours per square meter. It's not going to happen. A dental clinic has too much energy to meet that metric. But they recognize that, and so what they do is they have a whole kind of system of saying, you know, what's the best practices. There's a way they do it. So and this was going to be the first dental clinic in the world that wanted to get certified, so we said, well, let's try to do it as a prototype certification. And we went to the dentist, and they said, we don't want to pay any extra money for certification. So my partner and I paid out of our pocket to go work with PHI in Darmstadt, and it's been a wonderful experience. They've really made it a better project. It's been very helpful. It's just been very slow. But that's, you know, we're going to have a building that's completed to a new standard.